Hello and welcome to Dog Day Chess. In this episode we're going to look at two more openings, and as you can see we're going to go old school and retro. So the chess set you're looking at is something I created as a project for my grade 8 shop class. Well, officially called Industrial Arts, but of course we used to call it shop. And I didn't learn how to play chess until I was in grade 8. But when I did learn, I was so fascinated with the game that I got motivated to make myself my own chess set. Now, if the board looks like it's not square, that's because it's not. It's a bit wider than it is long, and that's because of a mistake I made when I was cutting the pieces. When I cut it in one direction, I failed to take into account the thickness of the saw blade and how much wood I would lose because of that. So I probably got the only non-square chessboard around. But anyway, traditional chess pieces have certain characteristics, and I tried to make sure that I put those same characteristics in the pieces that I made because some of them help to remind you how the pieces move. So for example, bishops have these diagonal cuts in them, and bishops move along diagonals. The knight's horse's head, if you look at the way that the ears come meet the head, they make kind of an L shape. And knights do move in an L shape, and being on horses, they can also jump other pieces. The rooks they look like turrets, and they have these gaps, which are actually called crenels. They have 4 of these crenels, and the rook moves in those 4 directions along the ranks and the files of the board. And the queen's crown has 8 jewels, or 8 grooves in it, and the queen moves in 8 directions. So whenever I'm playing someone who's really new to chess and having trouble remembering how the pieces move, I always explain these little mnemonics to them, and that seems to help them remember how the pieces move. Now I'm going to use this board to show you a very famous opening trap, and I actually used this in grade 8 to beat the local, not the local, but the class chess brainiac, and I beat him in 4 moves, and I'll show you how I did that. Okay, so I started by playing e4, and he answered with e5. Then I brought my bishop out to c4. This is called the bishop's opening. And he mirrored me by bringing his bishop out to c5. And this variation is called the classical variation of the bishop's opening. And then I brought my queen out to h5. And this is setting a trap. My queen from this position is threatening to capture this pawn and also putting pressure on the f7 pawn. And now my opponent responded by defending the e pawn. And at this point, I captured the f7 pawn and said, checkmate. And you can imagine his surprise, because it is checkmate. The king can't capture back because the bishop is guarding the queen. And if you saw my episode on mating patterns, you might recognize this as scholar's mate. And here's a cute coincidence. The name of the person I was playing was Scholard. So yes, I beat Scholard using scholar's mate. I don't suppose that's irony. I guess it'd be irony if he was actually a scholar and I beat him using scholar's mate. But anyway, so that's how that went out. And I'm bringing this up because this is actually an example of a bad trap. There are good traps and there are bad traps. Let's back it up here. A bad trap is a trap whereby if your opponent doesn't fall for it, then you're left in a worse off position than you would have been if you had done some other move. Okay, and good traps are everything else. That the move you're making, the trapping move that you're making, is sound regardless of whether your opponent falls for it or not. And this is a bad trap because the proper defense for this place here is not to move the pawn up, but rather to bring the queen in front of the king. And from this position, the black queen defends that pawn and also f7. And as you may have seen from previous episodes, this white queen now has ventured out too early in the game, and she'll get subject to threat after threat while black develops. So this could backfire for white if he doesn't fall for it. So I do not recommend that you use this as a trap. You should not be using bad traps. In general, you should assume that your opponent's going to make the best move possible, except if you're, in desperation and you're losing a game and you've got really nothing to lose. I suppose you could try, but in general, you should not be using bad traps. The main reason I'm bringing it up is to show you the trap and show you how to defend against it. So if someone should try it on you, then you can defend against it properly. So we've moved over to a different chess set, and we're going to look at a different opening. This chess set is a battery-operated, computerized chess set that I got when I was in grade 8, and at the time I thought it was the greatest thing. As you can see, it's got physical pieces that you move around on the board. It even has some spare queens for when you promote. It's got 2 levels of difficulty, level 1 and level 2 being the most difficult. But really, even level 2 is actually pretty easy. But at the time, for me, level 1 was unbeatable. I had trouble with that. And I'm going to show you the game that I played, which was the first time I ever beat it on level 1. So I was playing white, and I started with e4. Now in this set, the board's not actually electronically connected to the computer, so you have to enter in your moves manually. And he answers back with d5. And this is the center counter game. Now the main continuation is that I capture the d5 pawn, and black will respond by capturing my pawn with the queen. Now the main continuation at this point would be for me to bring my knight out and developing it with tempo, attacking the queen. That's the theoretical best move. Now at the time in grade 8, that's not what I played. I played c4. I was attacking the queen with the pawn. And black moves the queen to safety with a check on e4. And I block the check by moving my bishop in the way. And the queen captures my pawn. I don't think I realized at the time that I was leaving this pawn undefended. It's actually pretty deterministic at this point. As long as I make the same moves that I made when I originally beat it, the computer will answer with the same answers and I'll end up winning again. So now I bring my bishop out to attack the queen. And black moves the queen back to safety here on g5. So next I follow it up by moving my queen to a4. Threatening, that's a check. And black blocks the check with his knight. Now I capture the knight with my bishop. And black captures back with the pawn. So now I've got a fork coming here where I play a4 to c6, which is the queen capturing that pawn, forking the rook and the king. And black blocks it with the bishop. In which case I capture the rook. Check. This is a mate in 2. All he can do is block it with the bishop. And finally, checkmate. Now when I saw that line on the display, I thought the computer was malfunctioning. I didn't realize I had checkmated. I was just happy to have won the rook and then also won the bishop. Then I looked closely and I saw that it said, I lose. And wow, I was excited. It was celebration time after that. So there you have it, two very short games on two very old boards. And a couple of openings there that we looked at, the Bishop's opening and the center counter game. So as always, I hope you learned something from this episode, and thanks for watching.